Welcome to the Civil War Simulation Student Orientation video. The Civil War simulation is designed to help you understand how the election of 1860 and slavery tore the country apart. The impact of industrialization in the North and the lack of industrialization in the South. The impact of a vast railroad network in the North and very little transportation network in the South. The importance of natural resources and having them available at home instead of importing them from abroad. And finally, how the South was able to put up a tremendous fight despite all the disadvantages that they had in the country. So good luck. By reading the student overview, you get an overall general idea or overall scope of what the simulation is all about. This is the first thing you should read before going into the materials of the simulation. In 1860, you can see by the map up here, the railroad infrastructure in the United States was dominant in the North and very scattered in the South. This gave the North a tremendous advantage during the Civil War. Industrialization in the United States was predominantly in the North as well. As you can see, the concentration of factories in the Northeast were dominant in the United States, and the number of factories in the South was very limited, which was a big factor in the amount of industrial goods or war materials that could be produced in the South. It made them reliant on shipments from overseas in Europe. If you look at your top secret documents, the first thing it shows you is your army size. It says 75,000 for Iowa. On the map, that'll show up as 75. For 1,000 equals 1 to keep the map kind of clean. It also shows you what your state's majority political party was in 1860. It gives you the number of electoral votes that you'll have during the election. It gives an explanation of how your rating is determined for your army. The summary gives you a basic knowledge of your state and situation in 1860. And finally, your goals and objectives for the simulation are what guide you, and you have to come up with the ways that you achieve those objectives, but that's what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. In the simulation, each day is a year. The first day, 1860, is orientation day and election day. The second day is 1861. The simulation runs from 1861 to 1865, but it could end earlier. It just depends on the situation in your particular simulation and how it's going, but it will not go beyond 1865. We use a system called the order of turns so that everyone has equal opportunities. The North starts and then the South goes. During a turn, the North will declare war. They may declare several battles, and then they'll have movement. Now, you can move when you declare war, but you also can move troops after you're done with all your battles. Now, after your battles are done, you can move anything that you did not use during your war phase. So nothing that you used during war can be moved again until the next turn. And we'll try to get as many turns and start with the side that left off every day so that you get in as many as possible. Here we can see an example turn. Kentucky is attacking Tennessee, and then Missouri and Kansas attack Arkansas. Then Maryland attacks Arkansas. And after those are done, we go to movement. Minnesota moves 22 troops to Iowa. Wisconsin 91 to Illinois, and on and on. And then after that, we go to the Confederate side, and they'll declare war. Virginia, North Carolina attacks Pennsylvania, and so on. And then they do movement of troops that they did not use during war. They also can move Navy at the same time. Alright, we're looking at the Civil War map for HistorySimulations.com's Civil War simulation. And we're going to explain a little bit how the map works. First of all, the states and territories are all marked on the map. The blue states are the ones who have joined or remained neutral to the Civil War in the Union. And the pink ones are part of the Confederacy, or the states that seceded from the Union at this point in the simulation. You can also see that the United States is surrounded by British Canada and Mexico. The territories are a light tan color, and we'll talk a little bit about the railroad situation later on. Now, looking at armies, as you can see, for example, here we have armies in Missouri. The Missouri, the MO represents Missouri, of course, and the 110 is the size of the army. Now, we've reduced the numbers down to make it more manageable for the simulation. So the size of Missouri's force in the Union Army is 110. Now, we'll talk a little bit about movement and why the colors are that way, but all of the armies are represented by flags to show whether they are part of the Confederacy or part of the Union. Also, if you can look, you can see over here, Virginia is a part of the Confederacy, but they also have an army in Ohio in the Union Army, because some people went and volunteered because they believed in the Union cause, in the same way for the Confederacy. The Confederacy down here has, Kentucky has an army of 40 inside Tennessee because they believed in the Confederacy. And so you have a little mixing of states that way, so I just want to kind of explain that. Now you might wonder what all the colors represent. Well, that's how we're going to do movement in this simulation. We're trying to show how the railroad system had such a huge impact on the war. Now, of course, if you've looked through some of the materials already, you can see the amount of railroads in the Northeast and in the Union in general is much more extensive than that in the Confederacy. And so we have these railroad symbols up here, like you see in Minnesota. Now that rail symbol, for example, is a 1. And so the orange means that that particular army can move one state per turn. So I can move Minnesota into Wisconsin in one turn. Just like that. Because it's orange and it's an orange. So they can move each turn. Now, if you move down to a green state like Illinois, the Illinois 250, they can move all the way into Pennsylvania in one turn. Because they are in a zero railroad system, which means they don't need any turns. They can move through the green railroad states all in one move. So we move from Illinois, we move 1, 2, we move 3 states over in one turn. Because there's such an extensive rail system, you can move your troops a lot faster on rail than you can moving just across land and wagons and horses and so forth. So that's kind of what the rail system does. If you look down here, the white or the 2, that means that the Kansas, for example, the Kansas Army here won't be able to move in the first turn. So we'd have to announce, okay, the Kansas Army is moving into Missouri. So we're going to go and make them orange so that next time when their turn comes up, they can move because they paused one turn. Okay, that's all they have to do is pause one turn. And you can see that there's a lot in the southwest of the Confederacy. There's not very much railroad here, and so it takes longer for them to move, which of course was a decisive advantage for the North. And up here also in the far Northeast, we just list those because those states are so small. All these, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, they're all zero railroad. They have extensive railroad networks. So we just list them there to save room on the map and not make things so cluttered. The last part of the map Or actually, I should talk about the navies. You can see down here the Confederate Navy. We've got the Confederate flag with an anchor showing it's a Navy, and the size of the Navy, which down here is 50. And then, of course, the Union Navy over here, which is very dominant, is labeled by the United States flag, the anchor, and then the size of that Navy. We primarily use the navies for showing the blockading of the South by the Union Navy to cut off their supplies, and that's what this represents right here. We use the British flag to represent the foreign importing of natural resources, because the South has not developed very many natural resources at this point in the country's history. So they're really relying on getting natural resources through the sea. And so that's one thing that the Union side can do, is blockade the South, which of course will cut off their natural resources. Natural resources for the North primarily come from Pennsylvania. Was the most developed of all of them, and that's why they get their natural resources there. And that really represents just about everything on the map. As you can see, the territories are all number 2 railroad transportation designs, and so it would take a very long time to get through the territories because they're pretty wild and there's no railroad at all. And so movement through there would be very slow, and that will stop people from trying to just swing around to attack the South or to attack the North from behind, because that just really wasn't very realistic. This is a declaration of war slip, as you can see at the top. We'll fill out what period we're in. The state of Virginia is declaring war on the state of Pennsylvania, sending the following army at 110 into Pennsylvania, and then of course you put your name at the bottom. The rules are we do one battle at a time. The defender cannot retreat. And if we have multiple states attacking another state, all the slips have to be handed in together so the teacher can be organized and know and be able to reference how many troops are going where. And so you fill these out every time you want to declare war or have a battle. Each student will do a simulation report, and you can work on this throughout the simulation if you have downtime. It's due at the end of the simulation. You also have to fill in your objectives from your state, and then you have to explain how you tried to complete those objectives. You should get full or partial credit for making a legitimate attempt to try to achieve your objectives. If you go against your objectives, it could really hurt your grade. Every day of the simulation, you're required to journal. The things that you want to put in a journal to get a good grade are your thoughts, the plans you have or strategy, and significant events. Thoughts, plans, and strategy are the most important. The thing we don't want to see is a technical play-by-play. I move 40 troops here, move 40 troops there. We don't want to hear that stuff. Here is an example entry. This is for the state of Georgia, period 2, 1861. We, as in the Confederacy, have been working hard to convince the Union to leave us alone, and that we are ready to fight to maintain our separation from the Union. The North is massing troops all along the Confederate border. We are also trying to move our own troops into position, but our armies move much slower without sufficient railroad networks. Our strategy is to slow the Union down as much as possible until we can build up enough forces to shatter the Union advance. So really what we want to know is what you're thinking during the simulation. Helpful advice. One of the things that you need to think about is, what is the other side trying to do? And in order to be ready every day, you need to have a plan, and then you need to be ready to change that plan. Think about and understand the self-interest of the other guy.